We're back. I'm Alex from Lower Street, and on this episode of Podcast Book Club, we're talking about podcast trailers with the inimitable Arielle Nissenblatt, who, as luck would have it, co-hosts her own show all about podcast trailers. We recorded this episode late last year, and we dug into what we think makes a great podcast trailer, what to do with one once you've made it, and we listened to some podcast trailers that we think absolutely slap. Oh, and we talked to Arielle about her own podcast, which is all about trailers for podcasts on this podcast about... Anyway, on with the show. Hi, I'm Alex, Senior Audio Engineer at Lower Street. I spend my time in this very room. I'm always here, editing and mixing podcasts, and I sleep on that couch. Erin, how's it going?
Alex is lying. I know that he has a different place where he edits, but I love the idea that he might...
A different couch that he sleeps on?
Yeah, he actually sleeps directly on the floor.
Couch is too decadent.
Yeah. My name is Erin McIndoe-Sproul, and I am an executive producer at Lower Street, and I am really excited to talk about trailers today. I love this as an episode topic, so yeah, super cool. And so excited to have our special guest with us today.
So I think she meant me.
Obviously.
My name is Andrew Gannum. I am a producer, and my other title at Lower Street is Podcast Success, which, if you know what that means, email me. And I'm based in Minneapolis in the United States.
I love Minneapolis.
Great town.
My name's Arielle Nissenblatt. I'm the community marketing manager at Descript. I was at Squadcast for 3 years, but recently Squadcast was acquired by Descript, so very exciting stuff going on over there. I'm also the founder of Earbuds Podcast Collective, which is a podcast recommendation newsletter. And I believe I'm here today because one of the other things that I do is that I have a podcast with my co-host Tim Villegas. It's called Trailer Park, the Podcast Trailer Podcast. I love trailers. I love podcasts. I want to help you discover your next favorite podcast, maybe by way of a trailer. And we're here to discuss trailers.
Yes, bring us back to the most, meta of podcast conversations, where a podcast that talks about podcasts has a guest on who also has a podcast that talks about podcasts. So you said you love trailers, but we all know that making a podcast is a lot of work. So what was it, just the love of trailers that got you to kind of strap your boots on and actually go through all the effort of putting a show together?
Well, the story is really that I tend to listen to trailers before I commit to listening to a full season of a show when that show is serialized or investigative or limited run. I like to use the trailer to determine if the title of the show and the cover art reflects what's in the trailer, and then the trailer reflects what's in the podcast. There was a show that really intrigued me by title. It was called Crooked City, and I listened to the trailer, and it wasn't what I thought it was, right? So that's sort of an interesting thing. So the trailer can be helpful there. It can help you sort of weed out what you may or may not be interested in. But I was in the Midwest, actually, Andrew. I was with my friend Abby in Chicago. Shout out to Abby. She actually edits my newsletter, Earbuds Podcast Collective. But we were driving from Chicago to Omaha for a wedding. And we were going to listen to podcasts in the car. And we didn't know exactly what to listen to because we have varying interests between the two of us. So I suggested, why don't we go to Apple Podcasts New and Noteworthy, and we will look at what's being featured, and we'll hit play on a few of those trailers and decide based on the trailers what to commit our time to. And what was interesting there was that I had listened to some of those podcasts that were featured on New and Noteworthy. And what I found was that when we hit play on the trailer, a lot of the trailers didn't reflect exactly what was in the episodes. I was like, I think you're going to love this show. And then we'd listen to the trailer and she'd be like, yeah, that's not really my speed. And I was like, no, I promise it is your speed, but the trailer didn't do it. And then that made me think, like, where's the difference here? Like, how are people not getting this right? And how can we make sure that people do get it right so that your ideal listener finds you by way of your trailer and sticks with you? So yeah, I love trailers, and that's the origin story. And then from there, I very publicly on Twitter was like, I want to make a podcast all about podcast trailers, not just about trailers that exist, but also trailers that were made as proof of concept or trailers that were made just for fun. It's a fun way to tease audio into what may be a full-fledged podcast or what may just die on the vine.
I was thinking about when I was putting this together and listening to various trailers, has there ever been a trailer that has caused me to listen to the show or not listen to it? If I've found a show, have I ever come across a trailer that's either been so good that's made me listen to something I wasn't planning on listening to, or so bad that it stopped me from listening to a show? And I'm not sure if I have, to be honest.
I have one example. Okay, so do you know Jeanette McCurdy?
Yes.
Okay, so she has a book that came out, I want to say, within the past year, called I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it made waves because that's a title. That's a choice. And she recently started working with Lemonada Media on a podcast called Hard Feelings with Lemonada. I was not going to listen to it, but yesterday, Lauren Pacell, who I work with at Tink Media on some consulting things, she posted in a Slack channel that I must listen to the trailer for this new show. And actually, can we drop it here? Because it is worth it for people to listen to.
Lemonada. I'm feeling irritated about having to record a trailer for the podcast. You know why? Because I'm going, who listens to these? Who? I've never listened to a podcast trailer in all my days, okay? Not a one. Never in my life have I gone, you know what I feel like doing? Listening to a fucking podcast trailer. This is going nowhere. Nobody's going to hear this. Why am I recording this? I'm the host, me, Jeanette McCurdy. If you like me, maybe listen to the podcast. If you don't like me, maybe don't. Feels pretty intuitive. Hard Feelings is coming out October 24th from Lemonada Media.
Okay, I think it's genius.
That's great.
I think it's going to be one of the most listened to trailers out there.
I love it. I love it. Was something actually I wanted to talk about a bit today too, even just so one of our trailers, which for this podcast book club that we'll talk about later, which the amazing Alex Bennett did, is kind of it's sort of in the style of the really old, extremely cinematic trailer that's amping up, exactly, this extreme tension sort of thing. And I love that Alex came up with that concept because it's kind of making fun of the whole concept of trailers while also making it the most extreme version of a trailer that it can be.
In a world drowning in podcasts.
Hello, it's Basha here.
Hey everybody. I don't normally do it. Have you ever done DMT?
A specially selected team is on a mission to find the best and bring their powers of analysis to bear.
But then this is doing the same thing, but also kind of in the opposite way in terms of the bells and the whistles. It makes me think okay, her show's going to be like that. It's just her as she says, literally talking to her phone,
Alex is
power
in the
outage.
now.
Sorry, we must address
1 minute,
Alex.
please.
Alex just became Lord of Darkness.
Sorry. There's an emergency at PBC HQ. It's fine now.
See, that makes me understand the concept of video podcast, what just happened.
Yeah.
That's it, though. But yes, Erin, I think you make a great point. What's interesting to me about Jeanette McCurdy's trailer is, first of all, I would like to have a sit down with her because I would push back against nobody listens to trailers or, what are you going to use a trailer for? I think there's a number of reasons to create trailers, and I discuss them constantly on my podcast and on social media. It's a really great on-ramp for your potential listeners. The podcast listening apps dedicate space to them. It's a really great way to populate your RSS feed before your show is ready to launch. Those are 3 really great reasons right off the bat. Whether or not people use them to become a potential listener, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But I think that she absolutely nailed the this pisses me off, fuck the world of it all. And it does make me want to listen to the show. I don't know if the rest of the show holds up and kind of follows the same form. I will let you know. But that attracted me to it. That trailer attracted me to the show.
One of the things that I think is so great about it is she's saying, fuck podcast trailers, who listens to these? But she does a really amazing job of the purpose of a trailer, which is communicating what the show is like in a really bite-sized way. So she talks about nixing all these creative ideas, because what the podcast is at its heart is just her talking. It's just exactly what the podcast is. She's just presenting it right there.
On like an emotional level almost as a listener, I think the things that make great trailers are their tone and the kind of feeling of them. I mean, there are a great number of rules that you can bear in mind as to like length, content, what you should put in them. But that Jeanette McCurdy trailer and another one we have coming up for Blowback is all about a vibe, basically. And you either buy into that or you don't. It's tricky because it's amorphous. Like, how does one construct a vibe? Which is an awful sentence, but how would you go about doing that?
How does one construct a vibe?
Especially when it is so constantly deteriorating.
That's like an anthropological study that will be happening in the 2300s.
It's basically what we do every day at Lower Street, constructing vibes. Making podcasts.
We're vibe architects.
Vibe architects. That's what our new titles are going to be. It's so true. Like, I think you brought up a little bit, Arielle, the purpose of a podcast trailer from an audience perspective. And she's saying like, no one listens to these, blah, blah, blah. And like, I definitely listen to trailers because I want to try before I buy. I'm not just going to throw on some random episode and listen to for 30 minutes. How dare you ask for 30 minutes of my time? Give me something to like taste it first, like dip my toe in the water, see if I want to go in. But I think that too, in like the vibe construction piece and what we do at Lower Street being in production, the trailer is often what we'll do with our clients before we actually do an episode. And for me, it's such an amazing creative tool. And you talk about this in Trailer Park too, Arielle, but it's such an amazing tool for deciding what your vibe is and deciding what the show is about. Especially if you're like an independent creator, it can be really, really hard to like take that first step. And
the same is true even if you're trying to make a more complicated trailer, like taking big creative risks and putting a huge amount of effort. Like, the amount of hours worked per minute of final content for a trailer can be really high, like relatively speaking, compared to a full podcast episode. So even if you do have some post-production chops or something and you really want to just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, podcast trailer's a great place to do that as well. Because what's 2 minutes max?
Yeah, and you can change it. You can make a trailer for the beginning of the season, and if you don't like it, and if it's not doing what you hoped it would do, you can make another trailer. Or if you have a new season or a new series, you can make trailers for that. I think people really get wrapped up in, I should do it this way, I should do it that way, but it's like, you can do it many ways. You can do anything you want in podcasting because there are no regulations yet, hopefully ever.
Speaking of, something interesting about Trailer Park I found was the inclusion of a pre-trailer, a trailer, and a teaser episode, which I thought was really interesting. So what was the thought process behind the pre-trailer, trailer, and teaser?
Yeah, pre-trailer was about 30 seconds. The reason I made that was because I wanted to populate the feed before I was ready to launch the show and have somewhere to send people to like, comment, subscribe, follow. The trailer was 1-ish minute, a little bit more than that, and that was our standard trailer. And then we had another teaser, which was about 3 minutes long, a little bit more information about the show, plus a showcase of mine and my co-host Tim's personalities so that people can sort of decide if they want to listen. And the reason we dropped all three of those was because each of them allowed us to make noise about the show. They were 3 separate launch events. Plus, when we dropped the actual first episode, we got to launch again. So we had 4 launches built into this whole thing, and nobody says you can't do that. So we just did it. And each of those things had separate reasons for drawing a potential new persona to the show.
When you're putting out a trailer as a creator, what can you do to utilize that audio that you've worked so hard on besides just, dropping it in the feed? What can you do around that to help hype people up?
Yeah, a number of things. First of all, make yourself some nice looking audiograms and play around with shapes and asset ratios and colors and different ways to potentially entice a listener, but at that point, they'll be a viewer. I'm going to be posting it on Instagram Reels. I'm going to be posting it on LinkedIn. I'm going to be posting it on Twitter, and I'm going to be posting it on TikTok, maybe. So that's something I would do is you have the audio, play around with video elements. If you record using Squadcast and then edit in Descript, you can make your audiograms really, really easily, and you can add elements to them. I highly recommend doing that. There's research that people are discovering podcasts by way of social media, and it's not in the way that you would think. They're discovering video clips by way of social media because the algorithm is just made for that. And that could mean sometimes that they are becoming podcast listeners, and sometimes they're just taking in what you have to create by way of video, and maybe down the line, they like what you're doing and they become a podcast listener. If making all of your podcast into a video podcast is intimidating to you, do it with your trailer. Play around with your trailer. Play around with short snippets. Okay, that's the first thing I would do. Second thing I would do is I would be pitching your trailer around to potentially get featured on other podcasts that are similar to that one or that have tonal similarities or, maybe are in the same category. Make a list of shows that it would be great for your podcast trailer to appear on. Maybe they will organically talk about your show. So pitch yourself in that way. Think about what you can give in exchange for that. Or maybe if you have budget, you can pay for things like that. You can also do trailer swaps. And this is sort of interesting because you might not want to do this if you are a brand new podcast at the beginning of your season. But maybe once your season ends, that's when you can sort of do the reciprocity element of things.
That's awesome.
Oh, and make mountains out of molehills. And what I mean by that is you should absolutely take advantage of every single tiny piece of press that you get when it comes to your podcast. So what I did for Trailer Park, the podcast Trailer Podcast, was leading up to the show, I pinned a tweet at the top of my profile and I said, this thread will contain every single mention that Trailer Park gets over the next few months. And every time somebody said something nice about the show, or every time we got featured somewhere, or every time we got a rating and review, I posted about it. And what that did was it just brought that back up to the top of people's feeds, and it got people excited. Make mountains out of molehills.
When doing a lot of media for audio dramas, when you release something that is maybe a single episode and isn't even part of a series, and trying to get people to listen to that, it very much teaches you the lesson that you can just repost it again and again and again. And if it goes on some little regional digital radio station, that's a round of applause and something that's worth talking about. So yeah, I completely agree. I think it'd be a good idea to watch a video trailer for a podcast. And because it's me and I love him, it's the trailer for season 4 of Blowback.
I was there when the first dreams came off the assembly line. I was there when they began welding the things into their armor, bolting on the wheels. Pouring in the jelly. I was there when they turned the juice on. And I was there when the things began to twitch.
Damn. It's so beautifully done.
It's really intense.
I have no idea that it's a podcast if I don't know. right? And that's fine because not everybody cares about the medium of podcasting as much as I do. Like if you make video, people won't necessarily, the people who are scrolling around on TikTok or on YouTube Shorts or on Reels and are getting fed content that is podcast content, but it's not directing you to an RSS feed, they are taking that into their brain and they're thinking, that sounds interesting. I'll find them wherever they are. Maybe it'll be a podcast, maybe it'll be a YouTube channel, whatever. So it's not necessarily the worst thing that I don't know that that's a podcast. That personally, it's the worst thing for me, but for other people, I would love to, at the end of it, just know that like it's available wherever it's available. I know they had blowback.show, but it would be nice, if it's mainly a podcast, I'd love to know that.
So I agree. It's not evident that this is a podcast. However, looping back to the whole kind of tone / vibes thing, this is 100% just tone, and it's excellent.
It's so well done.
I don't know what I'm excited for, but I am excited.
Not every creator can do this. I think the majority of podcasts that are being made without dollars and dollars and dollars, like that was clearly made with, need to spoon feed their listeners a little bit more clearly and let them know exactly what to expect, when to expect it, who they are. But if you've got the money and if your show is that kind of tone, something that's going to be a deep investigation into some tough topics, by all means, entertain me.
I think that for me, like the best thing about this trailer, which I tend to really, really love in trailers, is when there is a bit of an element of mystery. Like you're kind of teasing what you're going to be doing, but you're not like giving it all away. I would say this goes really, really far in that, like, as you're both saying, like, is this a podcast? Is this an animated film? Like, I don't know. Is this just a clip on its own? Like, what is this? But, I really like that element. It was interesting, thinking about, I don't think that this could really work as just an audio trailer. Like, I don't know if they even released it, as an audio trailer. It would be way too mysterious. It's only because of the relationship with the audio and the visuals. I think for me, like the worst trailers are ones that are like all information. Like literally, like someone just like gets to a mic and they're just like, hello, I am so and so and so. I am making a podcast about X and X and X and X. But I agree with you, Arielle, like if someone can sort of ask questions and like, do you want to know the answer to this? Well, we're going to answer it in this show if you listen. That's just like a way more engaging way. And you're still getting all that information across, but not in a way that is like, here is me telling you information in 2 minutes.
When in doubt, spoon feed your listener. If you need to put it out, put a placeholder that is literally you spoon feeding your listeners about what to expect in this episode. Over time, you can hone your craft and you can always create another trailer.
Even have different versions of the same trailer out there at the same time. Like the Blowback one's obviously video first, but you can have one out there that's audio first as well. And depending on the resources you have available to you and how much time you have, it's not a huge lift to make up 2 or 3 different versions of a podcast trailer. And I think that's one of the great things about the format. You can just experiment and iterate quite quickly.
If I could jump in on the Blowback trailer, it's benefiting from the fact that it's a trailer for season 4 of Blowback. I think it expects a certain familiarity with the subject matter and the tone, and it's doing a lot to hype up its listenership that's already familiar with it. And I think that can be something that I hadn't thought about with trailers, is reactivating your listeners that you already have and getting them excited, and not just looking to capture new listeners, especially if you're in a seasonal format where you go away for a while and come back. And something I thought was really impressive about it is I don't personally love the aesthetic that they went with, that kind of like more visceral anime, violent and hard-edged. That doesn't necessarily resonate with me, but the production value is clear and the scope is clear. And I think it really communicates to me that like this is a show that has a lot of thought behind it and covers a really wide area. And that is intriguing to me, even if kind of the tone itself is not. It's like, oh, this
turns you off.
Yeah.
I think you make a really good point that, Alex, you said this, that you can make 2 different trailers for 2 different populations. And I think that trailer, Andrew, that you were not necessarily excited by, it plays to the fan base that already exists. Whereas an audio trailer that is with this type of show probably going to get featured on a podcast listening app because the show it has a pretty big following. It got featured in Nick Quad's newsletter, 1.5 Speed from Vulture. So, a show like that is always going to be finding new pockets of audience. And therefore, it would be smart for them to have a podcast trailer that plays to a podcast audience in addition to a podcast trailer that plays to a YouTube audience that just loves these creators for whatever they will do.
Years ago, by which I mean 2 or 3 years, I was very into the whole podcast trailer thing, and I was giving a talk about it somewhere. And one of the points I had on one of the slides as to what to include, or like what a podcast trailer should do, how you should, use it to its best, was to state your business. And at the time, I meant that literally. This podcast is about, but I think talking about this, the Blowback one, you can state your business like tonally, and you can state your business in terms of saying we spent money on this show, or you can state your business by doing what Jeanette McCurdy did and having that kind of off the cuff, very natural sounding trailer. Like you can do that in ways that communicate what the podcast is, but not like super literally.
Yeah, for me, it's like that storytelling over information thing. Just always like, can you tell a story that conveys what this is about and gives people a sense of it, as opposed to like an explainer just explaining. People often default to the sort of information kind of thing. And I think you're right, Arielle, in terms of like if people are feeling like they're unable to move forward without kind of just like, here's the show that I'm putting together, this is what it's going to be about, like kind of that information thing, you should definitely start there. And then you can always, rejig it later.
I have a piece of advice that I think is so easy, so obvious that you might be like, why are you even saying this? But I think a lot of people don't take this into account, which is that before you make a trailer, or if you plan to update your trailer, go to your category on Apple Podcasts and listen to some of the other trailers that are, being featured, that are doing well on Apple Podcasts, that are charting. What do they do that you hate? Write it down. What do they do that you love? Write it down. What do they do that you could emulate? What do you have the resources to emulate? What do they do that you definitely want to diverge from? And I think that's a really great way to come up with a concept for a trailer, or 2 concepts for a trailer. And if you have nowhere else to start, be a student of the craft first. And yeah, I think a lot of people get stuck, to your point, Aaron. They think that there's one way to make a trailer. There's one way to make a podcast. There's not. There's 50,000 million and could go on forever. And the right thing for your podcast is different than the right thing for somebody else's podcast. That's why it's so hard to give general advice. And the only advice I tend to give is like, listen to other people and figure out what they do well.
Find your voice kind of thing.
I think this is a good opportunity to listen to the trailer for Reach, a space podcast for kids, because this is a trailer that's a little bit more nuts and bolts, I would say. If I were to have like a basic template of a trailer in my head, it would probably be something like this.
Can animals survive in space? Where do astronauts go to the bathroom? Is Pluto a planet? Is the moon really made of cheese?
Hi, I'm Brian Holden.
And I'm Meredith Stepien.
And we're going to answer all of these questions and more on our brand new show, Reach, a space podcast for kids.
Built for kids and based on questions from kids, Reach will feature fun interviews and stories, as well as experiments you can do at home in association with experts and thought partners from leading institutions like the Adler Planetarium and many, many more.
The first season of Reach begins June 16th, 2020.
Make sure you subscribe to Reach, a space podcast for kids, now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
Soundsington Media!
Hey Meredith, did you know that space is completely silent?
I did not know that.
Now you do.
Ooh, I love that ending.
Ooh, I hate that ending.
Ooh, tell me.
Okay. I feel like, one, it happens after the, like, ident for the production companies. I just feel like
we're done.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not expecting more. And I feel like it's going for, like, a playful, jokey tone. And that joke does not land with me, and it makes me feel like the humor on this podcast is not for me, which is fine.
I don't think it is because you're not a child.
Well, yeah, you'd be surprised, but yeah, which is fine. And maybe it hits with the target audience, but I do think it's an abstract joke. I was on board until then.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point about who the trailer's for. I wrote down that I assume this is for the parents, the trailer, and not for the kids. So
you think trailers in general for kids podcasts are for parents and not for kids?
I think this one is. I think this one is, insofar as there's a little bit of the kiddie stuff up front, but then it's like, this is a wholesome podcast. So
right. And they also bring into play like experiments from experts, right? Like kids don't care about that. They just want to have a good time. I think that the piece at the end of that did it for me. I loved it. I also loved the bumper at the end. Soundsington Media. That's fun. For me, the last bit was like, okay, what am I going to get out of this podcast? They just told me a fact right there. I feel like I've already gained something. But you're right that like I wasn't expecting it, which for me, I think worked.
Yeah, I think that in particular, the beginning and the end of a trailer are like really key moments. Because it's like, if you don't grab me in the first 15 seconds, I'm like really sharing with you all like how little attention span I have. I'm like, how dare you ask for 30 minutes of my time? How dare you ask for a full 2 minutes? But yeah, like if you're not grabbing me in that first 30 seconds, I might just turn off. Like I might be like, 2 minutes too much. Like whatever, I'm not into this. But then also just like what you're leaving people with at the end, I think is really important. And I love in the beginning, I think that this question answer format just works like so well. Like here's questions that we're going to ask and answer in the podcast. And here's like a taste of a bunch of them. And obviously the like kids' voices are just like so sweet and sonically like nice and cool to listen to too. And then, yeah, that little piece at the end and then the very stylized musical logo are like, oh, cool. This is like well produced and, you know, sounds fancy, which grabs me as well. But it has all that key information that I need to make the decision about whether I'm going to listen to this or not. And like, I might not listen to it because I'm not the target audience for this show and don't typically listen to kids podcasts. But if I was looking for one and I found this trailer, yes, I would be all in.
I suspect the bit at the end is a link to the first episode, which is about what is space.
Oh, you mean, did it start playing? Did the first episode start playing and we heard it by accident?
No, as in the trailer ends with like a fact about space and then the first episode is about space.
I think that's smart.
Well, which is interesting as well because I tend to think of a trailer as something that just kind of is out there on its own.
Yeah.
And not necessarily something that like hooks into the first episode, which I don't know how that would change how I think about trailers if I thought about them as almost like an album, you know, where they have to like...
Yeah, it's like bingeable.
I think it stands on its own and it could be a lead-in. And I think that's great because I think some kids will hear that trailer and say, I want to listen right now. And that's probably where that's coming into play. But it also acts as a free fact, you know, without even going further, you've gained something from this.
Thank you very much, guys, for taking part in this conversation. And
this is kind of a little teaser of what you get on my podcast, Trailer Park. We basically listen to trailers and then break down what worked and what didn't work. But yeah, I really love this exercise, and I think it's a really great way for creators to to continue progressing in their audio creation. And that's how we achieve podcast success, to bring back your title, Andrew.
Wow. And it's an awesome podcast. It's so much fun to listen to. Like really easily digestible episodes. You discover new shows. You get really interesting analysis.
Thanks. I was not looking for compliments, but I appreciate it. Season 2 coming soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.